at Texas, looking at Houston, looking at the largest school district in our state to see what's really going on here. And so we expect Mayor Turner and over 3 dozen faith leaders to talk about this.
And of course, all of this part of the TEA takeover that was first announced in March and then took place in June. We have gotten a lot of answers since then about what the transformation will be. A lot of it comes down to, Brianna, Mike Miles' plan called the new education system that is similar to what he did in Dallas that had mixed results in a couple of ways. The plan to reform, starting with the lowest performing schools in HISD, and the announcement about the libraries is one facet of that bigger plan.
Yeah, and let's just get to what people are having such an issue with. One, we know Mike Miles was appointed by Mike Morath, so none of the voters had any type of say in who this man was or how he was selected. Same thing for this board of managers. None of them were voted on by the public, so there's a real lack of accountability. Some would even say a lack of transparency with this entire process. And so I know at least on the side of TEA and HISD, they have been trying. We've been mentioning those family listening sessions. Parents can come bring their questions directly to Superintendent Miles. We've also had several school board meetings where people have showed up to try to talk with them, get answers. That's not necessarily the best venue for that. But on the part of HISD, there has at least been an effort. But here's the crux of this. There's 28 schools. We're talking about majority minority schools in Black and brown communities. And we're talking about removing their librarians. And that's gotten such a strong response because it creates a situation where you have some students in some schools that do not have this resource, while other students in other schools get to continue on with their librarians as normal. And so that's what's prompted all of this criticism.
There's a look at the information on your screen right now in terms of what will happen with this conversion. Librarians eliminated, media specialist positions eliminated. It will basically become a disciplinary setting where kids are taken out of the classroom, students are, and then access the classroom through Zoom. And this is happening at least 28 schools across HISD. The 28 initially designated as the heart of the takeover, so to speak, and then we know another 57 schools have opted into the new education system, and those will be determined on a case-by-case basis. Brianna and our viewers, let's take a live look at what we are seeing right now as this press conference is set to get underway.
Okay, so we're looking at not just faith leaders here. We see Representative Al Green, of course, representative from the state of Texas. It looks like they're getting ready to start here. But yeah, we're seeing Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, current U.S. rep, but also running for mayor. So we've got a lot of heavy hitters in the room right now, not just talking about those faith leaders as advertised. We've got state representatives.
And as you said, this is the largest school district in the state of Texas, one of the largest in the country. On the flip side of things, we know that while there has been backlash at every step of the way from HISD, from parents, from teachers, obviously so many involved in the community, we do know that the HISD system has had some major challenges, and in terms of reforming the district, some tough decisions that had to be made by the incoming governing body, I should say, led by Mike Miles. So there is absolutely that side of it. Mike Miles saying this week, Mayor Turner, we encourage you to come visit these campuses, saying that library resources will still be provided, that it's based on, student achievement and such. So there are certainly a lot of sides to this.
Yeah, and we've had kind of in the lead up to this, Mayor Sylvester Turner himself was a state legislator at the time where this TEA takeover became a possibility. He voted for it. He's been vocally against this situation from the start, though, and it looks like we're getting ready to hear from him again.
We will have it live here for you on ABC 13.
Today with Congressman Al Green and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, County Commissioner Adrian Garcia, Precinct 2, City Council members Carlos Cisneros and Robert Gallegos, Judson Robinson of the Houston area Urban League, and then a number, Larry Payne, who is an educator himself and has worked with the city and other mayors over the years, has a long history of being heavily involved in education. And then we have
To be having
the
a little bit of an
Houston
issue there trying to get that live feed.
Ministers,
I think we've got it
as
back right now.
well,
We hope to rejoin you to
and
that news
pastors and
conference.
ministers covering a number of churches that are here. Quite frankly, about 36 of them who are present, and appreciate them, and you'll be hearing from some of them as we move forward. This press conference is in reference to the closing of schools in HISD by the current superintendent and the Board of Managers. And all of you know how I feel about the closing of schools, closing of libraries as it relates to HISD. But even before I get started, the superintendent, of course, is aware of this press conference, and I see he has already issued his statement, which I'm going to read. And he says, I'm aware of Mayor Turner's planned press event. I cannot and will not govern the state's largest school district by press conference or press release. The time for politics is over, and we will not be distracted by intentional misinformation. I will work with anyone who is serious about improving the learning and life outcomes of HISD students. I have extended an invitation to the mayor to come see these schools in action and to learn more about the NES model, which is designed to provide the most support to Houston's most disadvantaged children. And I extend the same invitation to other elected officials and community leaders so that they can see for themselves the difference high-quality instruction can make for our kids. Well, let me just say before I go to my prepared remarks, I am serious about the learning and life outcomes of HISD students. And I've been serious before this superintendent ever stepped on Houston's grounds. I have committed most of my professional life in improving the quality of education and the quality of life for students, not just in HISD, but across this state. No one can take action in this city as if you are the general and we are less than your soldiers. That will not work, Superintendent. Also pleased to have City Councilwoman Carolyn Evans-Shabazz. Let me thank everyone for being here. I also have invited more than 36 prominent Houston faith leaders to stand united on this important issue, protecting our children and preventing some of our schools from being dismantled as a result of the state's takeover. For the past several weeks, ever since the state replaced the superintendent and elected board of trustees with an appointed board of managers and an appointed superintendent, we have watched the removal, resignations, and reassignment of key personnel within HISD. Simply put, a significant overhaul is happening in the state's largest school district with very little input from parents and community. We are only weeks away from the start of school, and there are changes in curriculum, a shortage of certified teachers that is forcing the school district to hire hundreds of substitute teachers. Each step has created concern for parents, teachers, and staff, which ultimately affects the students themselves. We can all agree that grades and academic achievement must improve at all of our schools, and there are students who need remedial help to improve their reading, their writing, their math skills. And we stand ready to assist any person, superintendent, board of managers, teachers, anyone else, to improve the quality of education in all of our schools. But you cannot do that by closing libraries on some campuses and converting them into disciplinary centers. That you cannot do. And we are in 2023. We are not in 1953, but 2023. This sends the wrong message. I've always been a strong proponent of libraries, especially in schools and neighborhoods where children are challenged for a number of reasons: poverty, unemployment, there may be all kinds of issues, lack of transportation, lack of resources at home, not connected to the Wi-Fi, or don't have the technology or all of those devices. Those are reasons why we should make sure that our schools are stronger and better. When you close libraries, you deprive all students of resources they need to learn and achieve. Now, I understand that the superintendent and the board of managers have decided that we are going to take this library space and use it for disciplinary centers for kids that have been unruly in the classrooms. But the problem with that model is that when you reassign libraries in these schools and you turn the library space into these disciplinary spaces, you don't just affect those kids who have acted up in the classroom. You are depriving all of those students access to the library. What about those 99% of the students who have not acted up? What about the 99% of the students who are following the teacher's instructions, being respectful? And what about the 99% of those students who might want to go to the library or research something? When you shut off the library without librarians, you're not just providing space to those kids who are unruly. You are denying functional space to every student at that school. And what is the message that you're sending to those students? What's the message that you're sending? And then what happens when those students go a few miles down the street? And Commissioner Garcia, they go to another school with a fully functional library. Librarians, books, technology. They have all the things that they need for themselves. But when you come to these schools, their services, their facilities are far less. Now, if people can't see the disparity in that, if they can't see the disparity in that, something's missing. And how can you teach these kids if you don't see the disparity in what you are doing? And why would you expect a city or a community to stand quiet when we see that disparity? Would the superintendent prefer that we not say anything? Would the superintendent prefer that we just rubber stamp this discrepancy? And then what do we say to our children? What do we say to them? That it's okay? Yet the superintendent told me to mind my own business. When I became mayor, I said I did not want to be the mayor of two cities in one, of have and have nots. That's what I said 8 years ago. I am standing firmly on that today. I will not be the mayor of two cities in one. And I will not be the mayor where we are creating two different systems in the same school district. HISD is creating a school district of the haves and have-nots, with some areas of the district equipped with libraries full of books and technology, while others will resemble a stark institution with no place for the students to go to their school library to study, check out a book, get the assistance of a librarian, and expand their own imagination by exploring treasured authors in history. You cannot have a system where you're closing libraries for some schools in certain neighborhoods, while more affluent neighborhood schools have libraries that are open and stocked with books and other resources. Now, let me just say this. I understand that teachers don't want unruly kids in their classrooms. I got that. I don't want unruly kids in the classrooms. But the answer is not to close their libraries. The answer is not to reassign the librarians. Now, if you need more space, go and put them in the gym. If you want to use the gym space, okay. But don't close the libraries. That sends the wrong message. Yes, some students are struggling and need additional support and attention. But the answer isn't throwing out libraries so that no student in that school can have access to a campus library, especially not in neighborhoods where libraries are needed the most. You don't close the library, remove the librarians, and simply have the books on the shelf. Under former Superintendent Millard House, HISD was putting a librarian at every school through a 5-year plan. If HISD reverses course and removes librarians and closes libraries now, some students may never develop a love and appreciation for reading. And we do not want our schools to look like prisons. Last week, I invited Superintendent Miles to City Hall to explain his plans for the state's largest school district. That offer still remains. In the meantime, he cannot expect us to remain silent. These are our children. These are our kids. These are our schools. This is our city. And long after he is gone, we will still be here. We are invested in their futures, and we do not want anyone sending the message to them that they deserve to have a library at their schools. And lastly, I'll say this morning through my Department of Education and Youth Engagement. We celebrated our summer interns. The goal this year, Congressman Green, was to have 20,000 paid interns in the city of Houston, the largest this city has ever seen. Well, we exceeded our goal. More than 20,000. These are our children, and we are investing in our kids. I'll close with this. Arthur Ashe, who in 1975 became the first black man to win Wimbledon, said, throughout my formal education, I spent many hours in public and school libraries. Libraries became courts of last resort, as it were. The current definitive answer to almost any question can be found within the four walls of most libraries, unquote. If he were alive today, he would want that same access for all of our children. But if HISD closes campus libraries, some children may not even have a chance to read about Arthur Ashe. Let me yield first to Congressman Al Green, then followed by Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I trust that you will allow me to acknowledge the presence of Reverend F.N. Williams. He is the sage that has been with us through much of this, and I know that Pastor Max Miller will understand that I did this. And Mayor, I want to thank you. I say it sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, for what you're doing to protect our children. I thank you. And I want to thank my colleague Jackson Lee for her efforts to do what she can through her good offices to do a similar thing. Would you show her just a little love for me as well? And Commissioner Garcia and my partner against crime, the councilwoman, give her a hand for me. I'm sorry, Mayor, I had to do it. Now, I promise I'm going to be as brief as I can, but Mayor, you inspired me to say things that I hadn't thought of. Mayor, I agree with what you have said, and I would simply add this. The governor of this state is where this buck stops. This governor intends to not only, it seems to me, close some schools, but it seems to me that he wants to change the entire system. There is a desire to have vouchers given to parents so that they can take their children out of public schools. Less than 69 years ago, the Supreme Court held that the schools should be desegregated. The Brown versus the Board of Education decision. Less than 70 years ago, we had Brown. Less than 70 years ago. Now here's what's important about this. The next year, Milton Friedman, a well-known conservative, proposed what the governor is proposing now, to keep schools segregated. That's what Friedman did, to keep the schools segregated. He proposed giving vouchers. When the law said you have to desegregate these schools, he said, well, rather than desegregate, we'll give all parents vouchers, let them take their children to the school of choice. School choice. From that moment to this one, there has not been an effort in earnest to integrate the schools in this country. There have been all sorts of plans to bring children together one way or another, but they haven't really put the effort forth necessary so that all children could get a quality education, not some schools better than other schools, all schools being quality schools so that all children could get a good quality education. That just has not been the case in this country. And my fear is this: if this governor has his way, we will find that we have vouchers in this state, that children are going to be taken out of public schools, and that we will find ourselves moving toward the resegregation of society. I think that's where we're headed, to the resegregation of society. I lived through segregation. There may be one or two of you here who lived through it as well. Anybody here had to go to the back door? Raise your hand if you had to go to a back door. There's another, okay. Anybody here had to drink from a colored water fountain? Colored water fountain? Colored water fountain, anybody? I'm the only person. All right, I drink from colored water fountains. I'm a son of the segregated South. I know what it's like to have to sit in the balcony of the movie in the back of the bus. I don't want to go back to that. So this is why I'm here today to say I support what this mayor is doing. He is taking the necessary steps to deal with this incremental step that is going to take us backwards. We've got to stop it here. The mayor, I saw your video, Mayor, when you said they've crossed the line. They've gone too far. He is right. We've got to stop it here. If we lose the libraries, what's next? If he can take the libraries, and turn them into detention centers? What is wrong with this man? Libraries should never, under any circumstance, become detention centers.
Okay, it looks like we've lost that signal again for the press conference. We were just hearing from
And
Representative
I'm
Al
agreeing
Green. It
with
looks like we
him.
got him again, so we're going to try to rejoin
Governor,
you to this news
we
conference.
can't let you do this. These
And right on cue, we lost it again. Brianna, I think it's just a good time, I think, to be able to jump in and kind of reset a little bit of what we heard. And I'm just not necessarily shocked, but taken with the strong words that we heard from Mayor Sylvester Turner and Congressman Green more recently.
Yeah, we were just hearing him speak really passionately about the fact that he said he was a son of the segregated South, right? It sounds like that was forever ago, but it was within the lifetime of Congressman Al Green. And so
Right.
he was talking about having to drink from colored water fountains and trying to draw a line between that and this plan to treat some schools differently than other schools in HISD. Again, this whole thing is about the closure of libraries in 28 schools targeted for reform to turn them into what the district calls team centers. The mayor and those in his corner are calling them detention centers, where kids who have
Right.
been unruly will be placed to learn via Zoom.
Zoom rooms, ultimately. And Mayor Turner saying we do not want our schools to look like prisons, quote, end quote. And we also saw, Brianna, an escalating back and forth between Superintendent Mike Miles and Mayor Sylvester Turner, taking it one step further than what we heard last week.
You know, they're trying to keep it professional, but this is getting really sharp on both ends, right? We've got Mike Miles, who has invited Turner to come to the NES schools and see for himself what it's all about when school starts. But Turner says, hey, you need to come down to City Hall and explain to all of us who are elected, because again, Miles was not elected, neither were any of the people sitting on the board
Right.
of trustees for the school district. So he says it's your job to come down and tell us what your plan for reform is and why we should accept it. But ultimately, they don't really have any say in this.
We'll be right back momentarily with more coverage here from the ABC 13 newsroom, special coverage of the ongoing saga between HISD and the TEA.
In 5, 4, 3, is to the open. Open notice. Come on.
This afternoon, Mayor Sylvester Turner and city leaders addressing issues with changes within HISD and some of the district's libraries being turned into disciplinary centers.
We're also hearing from top elected official Sheila Jackson-Lee addressing the crowd right now. And the new superintendent has also released a statement calling out Mayor Turner, saying in part that he wants the mayor to come and visit the schools for himself to see what it's all about.
We'll have much more on ABC 13.
And for those of you who are watching the stream, we again are trying to rejoin that news conference. We have a photographer there. I know that for a fact. Our photographer,
Right.
Fran, is there. Maybe some signal issues, trying to get that in really clear for you guys before we go back. But at last check, I was able to see Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee addressing the audience there about her concerns with this plan to close libraries, take librarians out of those 28 schools targeted for reform at least, and turn them into team centers, discipline centers. Depends on what side you're on, what you call those.
One of the main things that we're hearing is what kind of message does it send to young people to not be able to have libraries to access, and especially the fact that most of these changes will be in lower income schools, certainly the lowest performing schools in HISD. We'll return now to the press conference as we hear from Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee.
And touch a book. I want to salute your Director of Education, Ms. Janice Koski. I hope I almost have it right. But the main point of it is they have just been honored by the U.S. Department of Education for the work that they're doing in the city of Houston. I need to make that clear. The U.S. Department of Education did not send a letter to the mayor and said, mind your business. Stay out of helping young people be exposed. They sent them an absolute pronouncement and affirmation of excellence. So I want to just take a moment, as my colleague did, one, to put on the books, we are supportive of excellence in education. But let me speak specifically to the framework that has been designed by the present superintendent. Mike Morantz, you need to tell your superintendent, if you have to call the governor, you have to tell him to meet with community leaders. Mayor, I called him from Washington. I've yet to get a return call. My understanding is that he's picking and choosing those elected officials that he speaks with. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. Because we represent millions of parents and teachers and children in HISD. Unacceptable. So Mike Morantz, you need to return the call, and you need to direct your appointed superintendent, appointed, not elected, has no obligation, and if you all will look at my earlier quotes, I specifically focus on that there is no duty, no representation, no responsibility to any parent or any student. If you're not elected, you have no earthly reason to care one iota. And I will say this, myself, it didn't come to me, a mayor in the history of this city has never received a statement like that from any superintendent of any school district. I will put my little finger on it right now and say, please, if there's any news item, there has never been a statement being sent out by any superintendent, good, disgruntled, I don't view any of them disgruntled, I work with all of them, who are taking care of children, when a city mayor of the 4th largest city in the nation, or anyone else, congressman, congresswoman, or anyone else, commissioner, has tried to reach them. Have you seen this? No.
I've not got a phone call.
And have you seen any from any superintendent ever?
No.
So that's breaking news right now. That's breaking news. I feel hurt. So let me just get to the point. Over the years, 5 years, with my colleagues, we have pressed the Department of Education, Department of Justice, to know that this is wrong-headed. Even with the state legislation, which some of you are thinking of, there is a flexibility that, as has been said, the state government could have yielded. In particular, I wrote to them during the pandemic to ask them to waive, and with the leadership of the superintendents we had at that time, Grantham and House, we were able to get a stay of the tests during the pandemic. But here we are now in a moment when we are addressing the question of the issue of our students. This book is full of letters. Full of letters. This one in particular is going to the Department of Education, the Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights, and the President of the United States. They will have to act. Now they will have to act. With members of Congress, specifically I got, that did not live here, only to say that across the nation, people are shocked about the takeover. They're literally shocked. They wanted to put their name down. They're not in Houston, to be able to say this is an outrage. So now we are seeing the very example of what we tried to prevent. So let me just conclude my remarks by saying this. I believe in education. This is not a crime reduction program. Teachers who have children that need time out, for any of us who are the products of public school education, we went to something like the auditorium, and they had an auditorium teacher or monitor or whatever it is for those who were needing of time out. That's what we call it. Something is happening. We don't know what happened at home with that child, particularly if you're in this corridor, allegedly, of children that need extra help. And the mayor is right. In that population are stars, are academic geniuses, but they're in that corridor. And we want all children to have an opportunity. But look what you're doing. Why not the auditorium? Why not the gym? Why not an empty classroom? The symbolic statement is like when I had to ride in the back of the train traveling to visit my grandmother. Not metro, the train, on the big tracks. I was treated unequally. I was treated in a discriminatory manner. I lived in a segregated atmosphere that I had to go in the back of the train or in the train car for coloreds, as we were called, with my bag of fried chicken so that I'd have something to eat as I traveled. And someone will take this and they'll make a meme and they'll make a text and they'll make a tweet. But sometimes honesty is not shamed by people who have ill will. And so when you put these children, it is not a crime reduction program. I want the parents to understand. I want you to understand if you live in River Oaks, if you live in West Side, if you live in the Northwest Side, if you live way out Northwest, of East and West, please take this not as an issue that is only those individuals. This is the mayor of the entire city of Houston. It is to say that if you do it for one, you will do it for others. And so the eliminating of the libraries are a direct hit on Brown versus Board of Education, which in 1954 decided to integrate our schools. It is a violation, I believe, of the 1964 Civil Rights Act dealing with accommodations, stretching to the point of discriminating with one corridor getting something. This has nothing to do with education, to eliminate librarians and libraries. And I also think that Title VII under the Department of Education, it is violating, and actually this speaks loudly to the Department of Education and that Assistant for Civil Rights and the Department of Justice, who has indicated many things to me that this is getting their attention. It is time for them to act. The mayor is doing all that he can. We're doing all that we can. School is getting ready to start, and do you mean to tell me that these children will enter that school and they will be looking at Shady Dale? Where is their library, their librarian, and they have nothing but an empty room, and by the way, the bean bags have been taken out as well. And they will be sitting there. And my understanding is they will not be able to get out of their chair and pull a book, nor will the books be refreshed, nor will they be updated. So, Mayor, I close my remarks simply by indicating that the federal government was on notice of our opposition to the takeover. But now we've gone beyond what I could even understand. And that is, we have gone to a point of denial of learning for our children, denial of lost learning capacity, and denial of reading abilities by not adding over the layer of reading teachers this beautiful thing called a library. I close with these comments. Mary McLeod Bethune had 5 little chairs, and she organized a Bethune-Cookman College for freed slaves. Her statue now stands in Statutory Hall in the United States Congress. Cesar Chavez joined Martin King on ensuring that farm workers had housing, access to education, so that even if those parents were farm workers, those children would have another opportunity to become educated and choose their path. They may be in the fields now, but Cesar Chavez walked because he wanted them to be somewhere else in the years to come. Our children that we're speaking of may come from many different backgrounds, may speak different languages. Their status is not their fault. It is our responsibility as public school supporters, champions of it, and as Congressman Green said, not vouchering our school districts. Public school all the way because it's the equal opportunity platform. And I would just simply say, Mayor, I extend my hand of cooperation. As I said, this book is full of letters that even cite the poor treatment that TEA gave to those people with disabilities. You are right, and we stand with you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Congresswoman Lee, Congressman Green, members of City Council. let me just say that I am HISD. If not for HISD, I would not have been afforded the opportunity for the success I enjoy today. In spite of growing up not speaking English, in spite of coming from a family that had to depend on welfare, the books in my school, the librarians in my school, the teachers in my school helped to broaden my opportunity and my vision and my hopes and dreams for this city and for this county. And that's why I stand here today. But let me say that there is absolutely no parent that doesn't believe in the success of a school district. There's no parent who doesn't want to see a school district succeed. There's no parent that sends their kids to school every day saying, I hope you come home with less knowledge than how you left this morning. HISD is made up of 62% Hispanic Latino children, 22% African American, but 80% economically disadvantaged. We are counting on this school district to change the trajectory of this community. And we believe and we know that education is the answer. But for a state that has a poor record when put in charge of major operations, whether it's the electric grid, whether it's the foster care system, or whether any other major example in which the state has been put in charge, the state has historically failed and received a poor grade in managing those large operations. Doing this with no input from local government, Mayor, Congress members, doing it with no input from local parents, local teachers, or the students. And by the way, I'm proud that I helped to create the HISD Student Congress. No input from our students at a minimum puts HISD on a path to more problems. Community meetings, when the community isn't heard, is nothing more than a lecture. We saw how the state flush with federal cash that created a massive surplus, couldn't even agree on how to do property tax relief on the first place and second tries. And despite all that cash, they somehow forgot to fully fund schools or to start paying teachers a legitimate wage, all the while handing down another underfunded mandate to pay for campus security upgrades. Meanwhile, teachers still must rely on online fundraisers to get supplies for their classrooms. The formula for success isn't complicated. Fund schools so that they don't have to cut critical operations. Pay teachers well so we can attract the best. Involve and communicate with parents, teachers, and local leaders as the ones we have on this dais, so that we can all help with their on-the-ground knowledge and assessment of what works in Houston, Texas. One-size-fits-all solutions will never, ever allow for consensus. Open communication and a focus on improvements is key. Local representatives can contribute to a successful transition and positively impact the future of the district. The priority, we can all agree, is to work toward better student success. And so I encourage those that are in charge to check their egos at the door and understand that there are people here who have been on the ground for years, if not decades. These folks have skin in the game. Utilize these resources to achieve the best outcome. Anybody here a Nationals fan? Well, Jim Crane doesn't tell Jose Altuve how to hit a curved ball. Mr. Miles must understand that he has good players on the local roster who are ready to help if he just gives us a chance to help the team win. And I will say again, there's no parent that doesn't want a well-run school district that fosters success for their children. But eliminating libraries as a resource to educators does not work with the hopes and dreams that they have for their children. Mr. Miles, I think it's important that you go back, redo your homework, and rethink your approach. And let me just say briefly in Spanish. Estamos aquí para recordarle al superintendente del Distrito Escolar de Houston que todos los padres aquí.
So, Brianna, one of the things that stands out here, this feels like a flashpoint right now of the TEA takeover going all the way back to March, and we are getting at the deepest issues of our society here, what we're hearing from them when you talk about race, when you talk about wealth disparities, state versus city. It is all playing out in a very, very passionate press conference that we're listening to.
Yeah, all here under the umbrella of public education. And there's a lot of blame being passed around for this right now, but we have to remember the reason this is happening is because we had consistently underperforming schools in HISD. We just heard from the city council member, or excuse me, a council member for the county saying that nobody wants to send their kids to school and they don't come back having learned anything. So
right.
The goal is the same. What we're seeing is that our leaders do not agree on how we get our kids there.
And of course, to go back even further on this timeline when the TEA takeover was announced in March, that was essentially 3 years after this battle playing out in court, and much of the criticism at the time the takeover was announced, HISD saying, hey, the schools that were underperforming are no longer underperforming. You don't have to do this. And the TEA, Commissioner Mike Morath, saying we're basically legally bound because we made the decision. COVID-19 pandemic threw all of this into a flux. So even that gets complicated. This has been contentious from the start, Brianna.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting what we heard from Commissioner Garcia, because we did talk about how the superintendent has gone out into the community having these sessions where he takes questions from parents and is supposed to respond and give them more information. But he said, listen, it's not a informational session. It's actually more of a lecture, because he doesn't believe these families are getting the information that they need to make some good decisions about where they want their kids. Maybe they don't have a lot of decisions or options, rather. But he also talked about how he was a product of HISD. He's got skin in this game. So do all of those other elected officials. I thought it was really poignant when Mayor Turner said, when this takeover is done, we will still be here. He was talking about everybody up on that stage. These are our kids. We're going to have to deal with the consequences of this reform and everything that comes from it. So I would agree with you. This is the most pointed and sharp and passionate conversation we have had about this since March.
And let's be honest, there has always been an underlying racial tension in all of this, and it was very much brought to the forefront with the leaders that we heard today, from Mayor Sylvester Turner on down the board, talking about a district that is nearly 80% minority when you talk about Latino and African American, and a takeover that's happening from Commissioner Mike Morath. We heard Representative Green put the blame at the feet of Governor Greg Abbott, a takeover that is basically run by an all-white board. And so we've seen much of that flashed out in the forefront. I want to pull up, if we can, Brianna, the statement that we got from Mike Miles, really, as all of this was playing out.
Yeah, he said that he was aware of what was going on today. I thought it was really interesting. He called it a distraction, and he said that it is intentional misinformation. So he's kind of digging his heels in, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And the Superintendent Mike Miles talking about he's extended the invitation to Mayor Sylvester Turner. And Mayor Turner responding today, Brianna, saying, what would you have us do? Not say anything? And then it was very, sort of a tribal call of sorts. This is our city. This is our future. And I thought the point was interesting about Mayor Turner saying, long after you are gone, we will still be here. One of the criticisms of Mike Miles' plan in Dallas, the new education system, that frankly worked. I mean, and when we're talking about the new education system, to boil it down, it raises the pay for teachers in the lowest performing districts, makes it incentive-based pay, saying we're going to, basically pay you more based on your performance. It all worked initially, but it was not a sustainable plan.
Well,
Once the funding for that ran out, the test scores plummeted again, and I think a lot of that is behind what we're hearing, that this is not a long-term solution.
It's important to note as well that that performance piece is only evaluated based on test scores.
Absolutely. Another big criticism of
Yes,
this.
that's what a lot of parents have pushed back against, because we know in that educational environment, there's so much learning that is either reflected or sometimes not reflected
Sure.
based on a multiple choice test or even, a short essay. There's so much criticism around several of those factors like you just laid out. And so right now what we have is an appointed superintendent, elected leaders talking at each other, but it seems like there's becoming a smaller and smaller avenue for them to actually be able to sit down and talk to each other, because this is beginning to get heated.
Really well said. And another kind of continuation of that, basing everything on the standardized test, is this specific issue, closing libraries, which is really the abstract learning. How do you make a difference in children's lives with the books they read? And this is not just closing libraries. Librarian positions at these 28 schools, potentially more, will be eliminated. The impact on learning. We heard a denial of learning from Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Mike Miles says, on the other hand, this is going to improve learning and improve achievement by taking difficult children out of the classroom. This is not an easy situation, right, on either side.
And we want to talk about also what actually is feasible here, right? Because we know that the mayor and our elected officials don't actually have any jurisdiction over the public school system, right? So they said, we're going to talk, because right now that's kind of what they can do at this moment. But you saw from Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, she had her folder there. She stays in constant communication.
She had her receipts, as you said.
That's right. The Department of Education, Civil Rights Department, inside the Department of Education, because for some of the older African Americans in the room, they talked so passionately about remembering a time here in the South where things were separate and things were very unequal. And we know the Supreme Court has said that doesn't work in the United States of America, right? And so they're saying that we're getting dangerously close to a system like that
Two
again.
different school districts.
That's
and
right.
Mayor Turner
I
talking
go to
about
school over here. I have a library. I have a librarian who can help me research and who can suggest books that I may be interested in based on what I like to read about. And because you live over there and you go to that school, you don't.
We'll return now. Let's listen a little bit more to the press conference happening as city officials, and more than just city officials, Brianna. I mean, we've seen from a county and a state level as well, speaking out very passionately in this flashpoint issue of Mike Miles' plan to close HISD libraries at campuses across the district.
This is a heavy-handed position. I agree with Congressman Green. We need to advocate to this governor, because I think that's where the buck stops. That's right. And we need to begin that dialogue. I get it in terms of the superintendent and his position, but as it's been identified by Congresswoman, he was appointed and not elected. Therefore, he does not bear necessarily any responsibility to the community, but to follow the directions of those who hired him. And so I would encourage all of us to be strong in our advocacy as it relates for a good product in public education in the state of Texas, because we need it. This superintendent has talked about wanting to have things set by 2035. We need to know what he means by that and what's involved with those particulars. So I'm encouraging all of our pastors, our elected officials, you're on the front line, but let's not go to sleep on this. That's right. Let's be able to continue to push, to advocate. I remember something some years ago, and Dr. King has been mentioned in prior references. Basically, when they were those who were trying to silence him, his response was, no, we're going to keep advocating because sooner or later you got to deal with us. And I think if we would have that kind of determination, I think we can get the result we seek. Thank you for the space.
Thank you. Councilmember Gallegos.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As it was stated, we have to fight in regards to these libraries that are being closed. I'm also a product of HISD. My parents arrived as immigrants back in the 1920s, escaping the revolution in Mexico. I'm the youngest of 7, and we all went to HISD. And here I stand today between the mayor and congressional representatives and county commissioner and city council. My parents would be proud. But to know that our libraries are being closed, to know that HISD, like it's been stated, the majority in HISD is minority now. 62% is Latino. And what do they fear, Governor? Afraid that we are going to get our hands on books to learn our history? No, we are going to get our hands on books, and we will learn our history. We're being told what we can read and what we can't read. And now they want to close our libraries. I, for one, as the only council member here in the city of Houston, as a Latino representing half of the population, I say no. Do not close the libraries. We will learn our history. My dad, as I stated, came to Houston in the 1920s with his family escaping the Mexican Revolution. He told me stories where there were places that he could not go into because it said no Mexicans or dogs allowed. So we know our history, and you will not keep it from us, Governor.
Well done. Pastor Harvey Clemens, coming out of the Northeast, where many of these schools are located.
Thank you, Mayor, Congresspersons, Commissioner, and to all of my brother and sister clergy. I did not know young Calvin Jr. I just met him. He saw a name tag on the floor, picked it up, gave it to me, and I gave it to the person whose name it was. But it speaks to the conscientiousness of our young people who see a need and speaks to that need. I've made a friend. What we are talking about here, and thank you, Mayor. Thank you for not sitting back, but thank you for your leadership in this matter. What we are talking about here is about this young man.
Yes, sir.
It's about him. It's about his future. I grew up in Fifth Ward. I'm a product of public school districts. Attended Atherton Elementary, where Barbara Jordan went to school. Public school districts turned her out. The late Congressperson Mickey Leland went to Atherton Elementary. The late L. Franco Lee went to Atherton Elementary. It was in public schools where we attended libraries that allowed us to go places that we could not afford to go. The thing about books allow you to travel to far countries that your parents cannot afford to send you to.
Yes, sir.
They allow you to hear from people that in many occasions that your life will not bring you in contact with. Perhaps maybe this is not a debacle on the part of the superintendent or even the governor. Maybe this is a calculated effort to join in with what is happening in Florida and in other parts of our country, to try to rewrite our history, or at least to keep us from knowing our history. Mayor, I thank you for the opportunity to share this. I don't know what my comments will do, but I do remember hearing somewhere that when our brothers and sisters came over on slave ships, the reason why they didn't call us by our given name in Africa and gave us a new name is because they did not want us to know our legacy, our history, and from where we came and who we are. Because they knew that if they could cut us off from our ancestors, they could try to re-indoctrinate us to their own thoughts and ideas. Nothing has changed. The fight that Martin Luther King and his partners and colleagues were fighting then is the same fight that we're fighting now. And I invite all of my brothers and sisters, white, black, Hispanic, Jews, or Gentiles, to join us in this effort to rid our city and our country of this great poison of hatred and racism. I love you, my brother. I wish I could vote for you mayor again, but instead I'll vote for someone else.
Thank you.
By the name of Sheila Jackson Lee.
That's okay. Pastor Mia Wright, the pastor of Fountain of Praise.
Thank you, Mayor, to my congressman, and to all of our esteemed clergy and council members that are here. I'm actually Dr. Mia Wright. I have an earned doctorate in education. And so as you would know, education is very important to me. As a little girl in East Austin, where I grew up, the library was an important part of my learning and my education. And today it remains a fact, even with my two sons who have been educated in HISD, and my 8-year-old granddaughter and other grandchildren that are students right now in school. The library is a very critical part of their education. I was recently at a funeral for one of my friends, Dr. Kimberly Agnew Borders, her mother, Mrs. Betty Agnew, who was a long-term librarian in HISD. And there were adults who stood up to give accolades to Mrs. Agnew, who was their school librarian. Then they were followed by teachers who were educators, her colleagues in the elementary school in which she was a librarian, to share how impactful her influence was with helping them to educate students in times where they didn't know what to do. How can we help our students? The access to the librarian was necessary. I think it's safe to say that we probably all agree, everyone on this stage, I'm certain, agree that we're in trouble. We're in trouble if we take away library space. We're in trouble in 2023 if we remove librarians. And to know that to change the space from an educational space by which, as Pastor Clemens has said, students can learn, they can explore, they can live vicariously through someone else's experiences and through those books. They can access places that they could have never, ever known of. But we remove it to normalize bad behavior, place detention centers in that space, and not even allow those students even further access. What will we do? We're united on this stage to speak more than just words that are flowing from a stage or a microphone into a camera. I think we're united for advocacy. It's necessary for our children. It's necessary for our future. It's necessary for us as a people and a nation. This doesn't just damage one community, it damages all. So let's unite. Let's unite, just as the call has gone forth, from every ethnic background, every financial or economic background, every educational background, to unite to see our children succeed. They succeed by learning. They succeed by access. Let's unite to make a stand to say, this is not right, and let's change it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing coverage here on ABC 13 in the ABC 13 newsroom. I'm Jonathan Bruce, joined by Brianna Connor. Brianna, what is next in all of this? I think we certainly get the gist of a very, very emotional, passionate press conference, as it was once told to me here in this newsroom. When people start closing schools, now closing libraries, things get really emotional. What happens now?
You know, we have to talk about what we're seeing and what we're hearing. We have heard from elected leaders from the city, from the county, from the state, right? So we are seeing a very united front of elected and officials trying to force the hand of appointed Superintendent Mike Miles to maybe voluntarily come to the table and say, all right, maybe this was a step too far, and we can pull things back. The truth is, though, he doesn't have to. Right? He has been appointed for this specific reason, to reform this school district, to have better successful outcomes for HISD students. These people are just saying this isn't the way to go about it. Now, we also heard from U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. She's saying, I've got a whole folder of letters, not just from herself, but from leaders and families, in fact, all across the area, that she wants to send to the Department of Education. They have a civil rights division, and she and some other leaders are saying, maybe we can get the DOE to look into this, to then again try to put some pressure on Miles to pull back on this plan.
Which seems thin, frankly, and we know that the TEA and Mike Miles and Mike Morath have been operating from a position of data, and they're going to look at the data. These are the lowest performing schools, and we have to make these decisions. Over 2,000 positions already cut within HISD. In this latest round, in terms of the library plan, librarians, media specialists will be cut. All of this is being done to pay for, in part, the incentive-based program for teachers and for principals in those lowest performing school districts. One thing that Miles and HISD did say, Miles said today when this press conference started, quote, I will not govern by press conference. The time for politics is over. HISD has stressed that library resources will still be made available to students. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because frankly, Mike Miles is not walking any of this back, Brianna. I think we know that by now. It has been cutting with a heavy hand as major changes are being made.
And as mentioned, that's exactly what he was brought in to do. So he's got a mandate from Mike Morath, above him, the commissioner of the TEA, who then has a mandate from Greg Abbott. And we heard a lot of people laying the blame for this at Greg Abbott's feet today.
Big time.
His vision, his plan for reforming public education may be starting here in Houston with HISD. So this is a huge story. It by no means is going anywhere. This is kind of HISD, the city of Houston, Harris County. It's hard to think of us as like a David versus Goliath type situation. But these leaders, these parents, are literally trying to take on the government, in Austin to stop this. And so I think when it comes to their chances, that may be an accurate descriptor.
Yeah, I used the word flashpoint earlier, and you touch on it really well there. I mean, this is getting to the deep issues right now in Houston and the state of Texas: race, education, school vouchers, wealth disparity. We heard City Council member Robert Gallego say they want to say what we can and cannot read, and now they want to take away our books. We will learn our history. This is just, you know, when this started, there was a lot of unknown, Brianna, right? In terms of when the official takeover happened in June, new board of managers appointed, HISD board steps out. We didn't know what was going to happen. There wasn't accountability, and there was anger there.
Right.
Now we're getting answers, and it's not any easier, and it's not any less emotional than what we're seeing right now. Also an interesting part of this.
Shoes are dropping all the time. And so this is the big battle right now. There's more to come.
I know you'll be on the desk for Eyewitness News at 3, so we will let you step out. We appreciate your time here in the ABC 13 newsroom. I'm Jonathan Bruce alongside Brianna Connor. We will return now to continuing and more coverage of the press conference with, again, not just city leaders, but county, state congressmen and women, as well as members of the faith community happening right now in Houston.
A couple of days later, the daughter did not know the mom had hemmed up the pants. She went and she hemmed up the pants. The servant had been on vacation. When she came, she had no knowledge. The mom and the daughter, she hemmed up the pants. But when he went to put his long pants on Sunday morning, he was in knickerbockers and Bermuda shorts. All we're trying to tell you is leave us in our long pants. Don't take us back to knickerbockers, because you'll have a fight on your hand. May God bless you.
Thank you. Just a couple of more and we'll be done. Pastor Byron Stevenson, representing Houston Metropolitan Ministers Association. Representing Pastor S.J. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor, and to all of our national, state, local leaders. I stand on behalf of Houston Metropolitan Baptist Ministers Conference. Our president, Dr. S.J. Gilbert, the second is he was not able to be here, but I want to speak for him and speak for the thousands of pastors that we govern, pastors who have parents, have students, and have educators within their churches. I don't think that as a pastor myself, amongst some other clergy, that I have to explain the significance of a library to. I think we all understand that, but I want to say in short that we support you, Mayor, and we stand with you, and we agree with everything that has been said. We do not feel that libraries should be redefined as places of disciplinary centers. We just don't. We don't stand with that, and we speak for all of our constituents, all of our parents, all of our students who cannot speak for themselves. We think that this is a misrepresentation. We think really that this is an act of bullying. Sure. It's an act of bullying. Sure. And we stand with all of our